Hi, I'm Bill Perkins. Welcome to Compass TV. If you love the Lord, love your Bible, and love to learn, you're going to love this presentation. Curtis Bowers, a former Idaho state representative, gave a Stealing the Mind presentation in 2011 about the communist agenda operating behind the scenes in the United States. We posted it on Compass TV in January, the week Joe Biden took office, and it caused quite a stir with our viewers as he nailed what was coming 10 years before it happened. If you missed it, you can watch it on Compass TV at our compass.org website. In 2016, he came back to Stealing the Mind to do a follow-up presentation, again, absolutely nailing what was coming with even more unbelievable information. But he made a believer out of all of us with both amazing presentations. Enjoy The Masters of Deceit by Curtis Bowers.
Well, thank you for being here. It's always encouraging as we travel the country to see that there's groups of people in the little towns, the big cities, throughout this country that love God and are standing for the truth and are trying to make a difference. And it's really a blessing to see you. This is my family up there. And God has been good to me. We are traveling from now till the November election. My family and I were traveling throughout the country. We're in a different city every night, hopefully probably hitting all 48 lower states before November, and trying to do what we're doing here, to wake people up to the purposefulness of what has happened to our country, the decay, the rot, the revolution from within that has changed us as a people. And so God's been good to allow us to do that. Now, I've got a 6-hour presentation for you that Bill said I have 45 minutes to deliver. So you better buckle up your seatbelts and hold on. Before I start how many of you have seen the film Agenda Grinding America Down? Okay. We have them here with us. We have a twin pack that has the first film we made and the new one together. You really need to get this. It is the best tool I've seen that God allowed us to make to wake people up. In an hour and a half, someone will go from, I don't know what's going on, to awake, engaged, ashamed of themselves for not being active before, and ready to do something to make a difference. And that's why we made it, and God has blessed it. We've had over 10 million people come to our free showings all over the country. It's spread through grassroots America incredibly over the last 6 years. Now, what I'm going to talk to you today about is the revolution. And again, it's not the revolution that may be coming up the road. It is the one that we're in the midst of and losing. America has been declining for the last 60 or 70 years, not because that's just the way things go, but there has been a purposeful, premeditated attack on all of our institutions of influence to bring us down from within. And that's what both films get into, and it is very important information to have if you're going to be engaged in the battle. Now, this is one of the charts from the film. In case you haven't noticed, the enemy has a plan. They're very purposeful in everything they do. They're strategic, they're thoughtful, they are planning 50 and 100 years down the road of how they're going to subvert this and replace this with this, and so on and so forth. They have a commander-in-chief who's brilliant, named Satan. And that's why the efforts on their side are so consistent and so unified and so dedicated. I mean, I've never seen anything like I've been studying this now almost full-time for 10 years. And just the thoughtful strategy, the purposeful destruction, the masterful deceit, and the satanic dedication they have is sobering to eliminate everything that is good and right and true. That is their goal. And boy, have they been successful. 2,500 years ago, a man named Sun Tzu wrote a book called The Art of War. It's still the main training manual in all of our military academies. It is a masterpiece on strategy and warfare. And in that book, he said, if you know yourself, you will win the battle 50% of the time. If you know your enemy, you will win the battle 50% of the time. But if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will win 100% of the time. In America, we don't know either one. We don't know who we are. We don't know our enemy, who we are fighting. And because of that, the sobering truth is, I just turned 50 years old. And the sobering reality is this: we have not had a single lasting victory on a single issue in my entire life. It's time to wake up. It's not, wow, we just don't win these things. There is a purposefulness behind what is happening. And most of it has happened for two reasons. One, because the church stopped being the church, the pillar and ground of the truth. We believe the liberal lies that Christianity belongs inside the church walls. And so in the 30s, we started moving inside the church. And they were happy to see us do that. They said, we will fill all the positions throughout society you have been filling for the last several hundred years. And they did. And we allowed them to raise our children and to take over the seminaries and change us dramatically from within. Now here, I'm going to play just a little clip of the new film, Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit, because it sets up the talk that I'm giving. Volume.
And this is the point I think Americans need to comprehend. If America goes down economically, it will go down militarily. If America goes down militarily, we all go down. The free world is finished, and will be finished for a very, very long time.
Everything, practically, is in a self-destructive mode.
We're in the most critical period we've been since the Revolutionary War.
You're not alert, you're not awake with what's happening.
They would just as soon see this country on its knees and everything equalized.
That concept of collectivism, big government, is a magnet for the predator class.
The plans for all this are to have everything globally in place by 2020.
If we're that dumb and we allow this to happen, we deserve everything we're going to get, because we're going to get it right in the neck.
We're headed into what could be a nightmare that would make all the atrocities of the 20th century look like they were a dress rehearsal.
When people are afraid, they ask government to do more, not less.
Their theories are designed to scare the people to believe there's a crisis when there is not a crisis at all. There's no crisis.
I think we're losing more and more freedom because we are afraid.
The left wants you to believe that catastrophe is always just around the corner. And the only way to avoid it is to do exactly what they say. But this film will show everything they do is just a Trojan horse of deceit, carefully crafted to advance their real agenda of finishing America off.
We have been the main stumbling block to world communism since it first raised its ugly head.
From the promotion of Islam to the propaganda of climate change, from the deceit of Common Core to the manufactured economic crisis, and from their manipulation of the evangelical church to the unsustainable debt burden. This film will show the issues are simply being used as a smokescreen to hide the purposeful, premeditated, treasonous attacks on the foundations of our freedom.
The war on religion has just purged us from being able to determine right from wrong.
You know what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said about Russia? How the communists took over Russia? He said, we forgot God.
Their stated agenda, carved in stone on a monument in Georgia and outlined in documents placed in the Ark of Hope, is to eliminate 6.5 billion people by century's end. And they will succeed if we don't stop them.
This is not just a fight for the United States of America. This is a fight for civilization itself.
It's everything Karl Marx dreamed of before our very eyes.
I think they've pushed us over the cliff in every sense. America isn't going to fall. We are falling.
I'm going to just briefly go into a lot of these different issues that we're facing today. One of the 60s radicals once said, he said, "The issue is never the issue is always the revolution." And we have seen them masterfully capture all the movements and causes and things in our culture to use them as a weapon to destroy us from within. So a lot of people go, well, who is our enemy? What is causing this? Of course, it's ultimately Satan, but there are groups of people that he is using effectively and that we seem to be totally ignorant to. In 1999, the BBC had a poll to determine who was the greatest thinker of the last 1,000 years, not 100, 1,000. Think in your mind who you think that might be. Who won was not who I would have thought it is, but the more I think about it, they're probably right. It was good old Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto. They said he has had more influence on this world today than any person in 1,000 years. And I believe they're right. We've been told that communism is dead and the Cold War is over, but nothing could be further from the truth. The Marxist ideas are everywhere. They're being taught in all our colleges and universities. They're being accepted worldwide. We have to understand the Marxist enemy we are up against, or we are finished, because they truly are masters of deceit. I've never seen anything like it. I've been reading their books, their speeches for 10 years full time, and they're geniuses at strategy, deceit, and accomplishing the impossible unbelievably. The reality is this, too. A lot of people think, well, communism, that's so radical. And of course, they don't call it communism anymore. But the idea, anybody that believes the good of the many outweighs the good of the few is practically a Marxist. Now, they think, well, you know, what's so bad about that? But the problem is they don't know history to see every time that philosophy has been implemented in an authoritarian, a totalitarian government implements it, it is abuse and slaughter and control of the people. And of course, our country was based on the exact opposite of that. All we cared about is protecting each individual human because they're made in the image of God and priceless. And we knew if we take care of the individuals, the collective will be just fine. We're never going to allow things to focus on the collective, because if we do, all the little minority groups will fall through the cracks and be abused. One of the most important facts about our enemy and how they operate was given to us by the 20th century's greatest Marxist, a man named Vladimir Lenin, of course, the founder of the Soviet Union. And he, as I've read so many of his books now, he was one of the greatest strategists of all time. All the things we see from the left today, or even since the 60s, like Rules for Radicals by Alinsky and other ones, they plagiarized him. He was the genius behind this movement. But this is what he said, and it's a key thing for us to understand. He goes, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. And that is what they have done. That's what my movies talks about. They have worked their way into positions of everything that opposes them and then turn them to use them against themselves for victory. And it's incredible as you look through and see how they've done that and what they've done with that. That's what's happened to the evangelical church today. And I'll get more into some of those in a minute. Making agenda, we made it as a homeschool project as a family. And God has just blessed it. I really felt that this is what he wanted us to do, so he did it. And it's been amazing to see the results, but it's also opened up a whole new world to me. Because of the film, I've had so many different people contact me. I mean, CIA, FBI, KGB, retired ones that were good people or defectors from the Soviet Union that said, we saw your movie and that's exactly what has happened. We were on the inside, we knew that. And so I've met so many interesting people, been invited to a meeting in a town, across the country. I just meet them there in a place and whatever. But they're people that care. All the ones I've been in touch with were good, they're patriotic, many of them Christian Americans that retired from those services, but realize what's happening is devastating. And they saw it from the inner workings, and they validated to me even the path you're on is right. We were there in the middle of it, and we saw it. One of the individuals, one day I was in Boise at home, and they called and said, can you be in Houston tomorrow? I said, I can if I have to. What? They said, come, we have an important person for you to meet. And I said, okay. So I flew to Houston, and I met with a man named Pavel Stroilov, born and raised in the Soviet Union. His mentor was a man named Alexander Litvinenko. Has anybody ever heard of him? He was the man you might have heard of a few years ago that was poisoned by Putin with plutonium-210. Well, this is his little protege, and I met with him. And he had been Alexander Litvinenko had been a former KGB agent. And he had got Pavel inside the Kremlin to work at the Gorbachev Institute. And while Pavel was there, he stole 50,000 of the top secret files from the Gorbachev Foundation that really show what was going on during Gorbachev's dictatorship term. All his private memos to people, some people I know are translating them into English right now, but they expose 100% everything that I thought was true from what I've studied is true. From the collapse of the Soviet Union was a thing planned way in advance to the United Nations being an absolute instrument of public policy for the former Soviet Union and the satellites. It's a Marxist organization to the core, and get memos from Gorbachev talking about that, laughing about how that's our thing, let's just get that to be the world government, and on and on. But he answered for me, Pavel, when I was talking to him, a question I'd been digging in to find, and I couldn't find exactly for a long time. And this was the question I asked him. I said, Pavel, why didn't communism die? I mean, when it had been proved to be such a failure, why, what happened? Why didn't it die? And watch this little section and listen to what he talked about. I think it's a key piece of the puzzle.
It's not the case that the Cold War is over, or to put it another way, it's not the case that the West has won the Cold War. The Cold War was not a military confrontation between two military alliances. It was a war of ideologies. It was a war of utopian totalitarian socialism versus democracy, market economy, freedom.
I interviewed a New Zealander some years ago who infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party and was sent to the Soviet Union to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning in 1983. This was the school for communists from all over the world, 6,000 students at any one time, some of them on 7-year courses. They were taught there was going to be a massive opening to the West, that the communists did much better in times of détente than they did of conflict. So they were going to open up to the West, they were going to downplay communism, they were going to change their system.
One of the tenets laid down by Lenin was that you have to pretend to be defeated. Communism, as they say, or Leninism is the better word, has gone back and forth through this friendly mode, enemy mode, many times throughout history. And this is just to lure the opposition into a feeling of false security.
The way you finish ideological wars, the way you destroy an ideology, And we have historical precedent for that. That happened with the Nazis. We should have had the Cold War over 20 years ago, yes, but for that we would need a Nuremberg-style trial of communism, all the crimes exposed, all the archives opened, it's a judgment of history past. That didn't happen.
Now you've got to realize, when Nazi Germany was defeated in World War II, the Americans went in there and denazified the country. Anybody who was a Nazi was taken out of positions of power, totally changed the whole political climate. Russia was never de-KGB'd. The KGB was left in place, and now it is stronger than it ever was before. And you see their puppet, Mr. Putin, attempting to reinstitute the Soviet Empire now.
They may have changed their name. They took their hat, which said Communist Commissar across the top. They turned it around, and now it says entrepreneur or capitalist or social democrat or something. But it's the same hat on the same heads of the same Leninists.
Trial of communism should have finished that. It didn't happen, and therefore we are not out of that crisis. And that is the reason why we have Putin. That is the reason why you have Obama. It is still going on. The Cold War is going on. It's going on the streets of Moscow now. It's going on the streets of Tehran. It's going on really in America as well.
So the fact that it never had its trial, all the evils of the hundreds of millions of people being slaughtered wasn't exposed to the world like it should have been, like Nazism. We saw the pictures, we saw the films from the Holocaust and stuff, and people realized that's a bad thing. You don't want to ever be involved with that. But we never had that happen. Gorbachev, who tours the country like a king, his last couple of years as dictator of the Soviet Union, slaughtered hundreds of college students. He's a mass murderer. In peaceful protest, they just had signs for more freedom. He had a machine gun down. Our media hardly even covered it. And yet he comes to America, and he's just, the night I interviewed Pavel, I went to hear Gorbachev talk in Houston. He was speaking that same night. We went together and went and listened to him. And I thought, well, maybe he's apologetic, or maybe he's repented of what he's done. He went on for an hour and a half while the elite of Houston, Texas went berserk, like they were at an Elvis concert or something, and they just going nuts. As all older people and he talked about how evil America was, and it's destroying the world, and we have to stop this evil capitalism, and he hadn't changed one bit. He was as red as he's ever been. He's just now put it in a green package and pushed it through the environment. It's Hollywood. Just a movie that came out a few months ago, Trumbo. Anybody heard of that? Trumbo is about Dalton Trumbo, who was a screenwriter, a member of the Communist Party in America. They made him out to be the greatest hero ever. So our children don't understand what socialism and Marxism and communism is, so that's why they're all for Bernie Sanders. Sounds great. Who's not for sharing everything? They don't know history to go, yeah, it does kind of sound good, but unfortunately won't work till we get to heaven, because we are sinful, evil, vile people that always are looking out for number one, and unless we have motivation to work, like if a man doesn't work, neither shall he eat, we won't. And that's why socialism can never work, and that's why you can never stop at socialism on the road to communism. You have to finally go to communism, because socialism doesn't work and you run out of the money, then they can't be the nice guy anymore. They have to get the guns and say, you will work or we're going to put a bullet through your head. That's why you cannot, the lie of that, and we're going to see all the European countries collapse over the next 25 years, just from their socialist systems alone, but also Islam is taking them over. Western civilization will be erased from the planet within 40 years. All of our museums, our churches, when the Islamists take over, they destroy all Christendom. So all the beautiful British Museum, that will be burned to the ground, as will every church or turned into a mosque. Every graveyard, every cross will be removed, every Jewish star, everything. So that's where we're headed, and people still think it's just fun and games. Lenin also gave us another key. He said, carefully, attentively, and skillfully take advantage of even the smallest fissure among the enemy. seize every, even the smallest opportunity of gaining a mass ally, even though this ally be temporary, vacillating, unstable, unreliable, and conditional. Those who do not understand this fail to understand even a grain of Marxism. They use everyone. That's all this is about. The feminist movement, the fight for homosexual rights, all these things, they came into it and captured things and then used them to make sure they're also destroying foundations, removing bricks from the foundation of America. And they've been successful because they're masters of using language to make their causes sound so noble and just. I mean, who's not for saving the planet? Sounds like a pretty noble calling. Somebody already did that, though, 2,000 years ago. It goes on and on and on. One of the just brief topics here quickly, the extremists, Islam, what's going on with that? As I dug in, the Marxist, communist, socialist ties with Islam all over the world is so tight, it's not even funny. Alexander Litvinenko, the man I was talking about, Pavel's mentor, the KGB agent, before he died, he realized he had been poisoned, and he escaped to London. And while he was dying in the hospital, he told us some key things. He said, listen, the terrorist attacks against Russia, they were done by us, the KGB. We wanted to make it look like we were against radical Islam, and so everyone would think we're enemies of each other instead of the funders, the trainers, the providers of all weapons and everything. He also told us that the head of Al-Qaeda right now was trained by the KGB there in Moscow. He said the Islamic world, another person, blank for a minute, but the Islamic world has been penetrated, just like the Christian church in America. We know that the Marxists were going into our seminaries and divinity schools starting in the 1930s. The film has all the details of proof of that. In the 1950s, the Un-American Activities Committee in our Congress started interviewing people that had defected from the Communist Party, one of them being the founder of the Communist Party USA. And he told the whole thing there in the congressional record of how we've gotten into all the divinity schools and seminaries so we can start teaching the pastors and change them to make Christianity a social religion and get rid of all the spiritual side of things, just where it's a do-gooder thing. They go on in details. I read through these things. So it's been purposeful. The PLO, how many of you heard of the Palestine Liberation Organization? A good terrorist Islamic group, right? No. That group now has been proven since the Venona files came out in the late 80s and early 90s. That whole group was started by the KGB and the Soviet Union. Never had Islamic ties. They just pretended to be Islamists that started that to be a force for terrorism, to recruit Islamists into their thing for the terror and the deceit of what they were doing. And we know that is a fact. It just goes on and on as you dig in. It's crazy. But it doesn't surprise me because they're masters of deceit that use people. And what do they do to their enemy? They don't try to fight their enemy. They join their enemy and come in and subvert them from the inside out. They realize when you don't have huge numbers, you can't try to battle them all. You've got to change them from within. And that's what they've done. And they've captured. And it's just, it goes on and on. And I could go into so much more detail on these things, but I don't have the time. Educational disinformation. Now, most people know that the government schools aren't doing a good job educating our children. I don't think there's any argument in that. In fact, I've never met someone in my entire life, any teacher, student, or anyone that says the government schools are doing a great job educating our children. Isn't that funny? And yet we keep doing what we've always done. I think that's the definition of being crazy. The educational system has been collapsing for 70 years because that was the goal of the educational system. John Dewey, who is the founder of our government schools and still revered throughout America, he was a founding member of the Socialist Party in America. He was the author of the Humanist Manifesto, which you just read it if you want to know where he's coming from. He went over in the 20s to the Soviet Union to study Soviet-style education and bring it back to America. That's why the one-room schoolhouse disappeared like that, because one of the key foundations of Marxism is this: you have to age segregate, peer group everyone. So why? So you can customize the propaganda for each age level. You cannot propagandize a group that is made up of all different levels of intellect. It's not successful. You'll be exposed. And so that's why they did that. Age segregating peer grouping is rotten to the core. It is un-American, it's un-Christian. Even if it's taking place in churches, it's wrong and it doesn't work. That's why we're losing all our young people in churches as well. They go off, they get pulled from their families into little Sunday school classes, and maybe they're even taught good things, but it's all apart from the family. It's breaking down the structure of the family. And Karl Marx went into detail about that. He said, whatever we do, if it's church or anything else, we have to keep the children away from their parents so they're not brainwashed. And that's what they have tried to do, and we've bought right into it. John Dewey also dropped down in the 1930s at all of our top colleges and universities members of the Frankfurt School, which was a group of intellectuals from Frankfurt, Germany. And their stated agenda, in their own words, they said, quote, William Munzenberg, "We're going to make the West so corrupt it stinks," unquote. They want to rot us from within, make us so immoral, we are collapsing, we can't even keep it together. You say, well, why would they want to do that? Because of people that are collapsing and falling apart, they need big government. They don't just want, they need it. Their life, they can't even keep their life together. And that's why they did that. And they have been successful. Today, 49% of Americans are dependents of the federal government. They get some kind of assistance each month from the federal government. I mean, you look at this and the movie goes into it more. It's so rotten to the core, common core and everything. You can't believe it. And it doesn't matter if we've had Republicans in there or Democrats. It's gone the exact same direction. And the movie goes into detail. It's frustrating. It's the elite mindset that they believe in the collective. Maybe the Republicans at the higher level want a kind collective and the other ones don't mind the totalitarianism, but it's impossible. You cannot have big government without abusing your people. It's never happened in the 6,000 years of Earth history, and it never will, because God never intended man to have that kind of power over his fellow man, because he knew he would destroy it. One other key strategy on this point I want to tell you, as I studied, like Common Core, it was interesting to me. I thought, when they want to implement something in the schools, why would they give it a name? Why don't you just do it? And as I studied, I started to find out their strategy in that. They want it to have a name. You know why? So you have something to attack. You think, well, why do they want that? Because they want those that are engaged, which they know is just a small fringe minority, but those that are engaged, they want them to have an enemy. So it keeps all their time busy fighting Common Core, which, of course, even without Common Core, the schools are completely bankrupt. But the reason that is they talked about they will never get down to striking the root of the tree. You'll always be fixated on the branches of, this issue. And that's why we're hit with so many issues. They want to keep us all, we better stop this, and we better stop this. And we're never stopping. Wait a minute, why is all these things happening? What's down beneath here? What is causing this rot and this destruction of everything? And boy, they're so strategic, and we fall every time. It's just a tool to sidetrack us is all it is. The environment. The debate is over. Good old Al Gore. The debate is over because they know the debate could never take place, for they would lose. Because there is no facts. There's nothing on their side except empty rhetoric. The environmental movement, to its core, is simply the red agenda repackaged in green wrapping. That's all it is. Has nothing to do with clean air, water, and stewarding our resources, things that every human on the planet is for. It is to give them more power over the people. One other key strategy you need to understand, in whatever battle they throw at us, they always do it the same way. They present the facts, not just as lies, but lies that are 180 degrees opposite of the truth. It's called doublethink. If any of you read George Orwell's 1984, Big Brother, they called it doublethink. And doublethink was considered to be successful if the people you are brainwashing, everything they believe is the exact opposite of the truth. It's not just a lie, it's the opposite. And John Dewey, one of his friends that helped set up our system, he said, we're going to twist these children so much, we'll make them believe that black is white and white is black. I mean, they knew what they were doing. And the environmental movement, real quickly, what's the foundation of the whole movement? CO2 is a pollutant, which is kind of funny for those of us that didn't go to government schools. CO2 is plant food, if any have been brainwashed. It's the greatest single element in the entire system for everything that is green. And right now, the world level of CO2 is 425 parts per million. That probably doesn't mean anything to you because it didn't mean anything to me until I started studying it. Do you know what the optimum level of CO2 is for everything that is green? It's 1,600 parts per million. We're at 1/4 of the optimum level of CO2 for everything that is green. That's why greenhouse growers pump carbon dioxide in their greenhouses, doubling, tripling, quadrupling the level so everything green explodes. And yet they call their movement the green movement, that's stopping the production of CO2 because CO2 is produced, every living thing produces CO2. Every person, everything productive going on produces CO2. When you create electricity, when you drive your cars, and it's not a curse, it's wonderful. If we could increase the level of CO2 100, 200, or 300%, it'd be a wonderful thing. Every time CO2 doubles, the plant growth efficiency goes up 35%. So if you have 100 acres, all of a sudden you'll get 135 acres worth of wheat off that same 100 acres if you can double the CO2. And you double it again, then you're up 70%. It's all a lie, a complete lie to twist our minds where the facts don't make sense and so people give up and they just accept what they have been taught. Warming is bad. That's the next lie they have. Warming is bad? You go to the equator and the diversity of life is exploding because it's warm. Cold is the enemy of life, all life. Cold is what's terrible, not warming. If we could raise the Earth's temperature a degree or two, it'd be wonderful. We'd have longer growing seasons throughout the world. We'd have so much food we wouldn't know what to do with it. All of Canada and the former Soviet Union and all around, those would all be fertile cropland that now don't have quite enough to be able to grow full seasons and stuff. It's just a lie because they're masters of deceit. Overpopulation in the world. Are you kidding? The entire population of the world could live in the state of Texas. If you had 1/3 for housing, 1/3 for employment, and 1/3 for recreation, you could fit all 7 billion people in Texas. It's a complete lie. The world is empty, and anyone that's traveled knows that. I've had the privilege of traveling all over the world and all over America. I've been to all 50 states many, many, many times. And it's empty. This place is completely empty. And we also know from demography that there's 115 different countries and territories throughout the world that are dying off. They're not having the 2.1 children necessary to keep your population stable. 115, and America is one of them. We're at 1.75 now or something. We're not even sustaining it. We are dropping. Once this generation of elderly start dying off, the world population is going to start dropping for as far as the eye can see. We don't have a population crisis. Now, I mentioned Gorbachev briefly before. Do you know, just adding validity to what the environmental movement is all about, do you know what he did immediately in 1992 when he stepped down from the Soviet Union? He started an environmental group, Green Cross International. That's what he's been doing ever since. The talk I heard him give, that's what it was on. And you think, a former murderous dictator is involved in this thing? Yes. He's the one writing the policies for the United Nations, Agenda 21, sustainability, and on and on. But it gets a little scary when you dig in. There is something called the Earth Charter, which is supposed to be the new 10 commandments for the 21st century. Well, when I found out that also was written by Mr. Gorbachev, I couldn't believe what was going on. And let me tell you this environmental movement is moving in a very pagan direction, and it is spiritual, and it's evil. They have made an exact replica of the Ark of the Covenant to keep Mr. Gorbachev's Earth Charter in, and it goes throughout the world. as you can see, and people worshiping to it, praying to it. It travels around the world 365 days a year, and it is building momentum for this one world religious governmental system, and it is scary when you dig in. During the 20th centuries, the communists made two big mistakes that they have admitted to. They said, one, we realized that pure communism doesn't work. So now they're much more in fascist in economic orientation. They realize government does not know how to run business to make it profitable, so we need to marry up with the big business. So it's big government married to big business, which is fascism. And so they realize that we need to tweak that economically. So that's, you go to the Communist Party USA website or other things, that's how they're tweaking things today. And the second big mistake they realized they made is pushing atheism. They realize that doesn't work for most people. Most people want there to be at least a spiritual side to things. They want there to be something bigger than themselves to believe in. And so even Gorbachev himself, the former atheistic leader of the Soviet Union, he is into an entire spiritual reality now of paganism. It's earth worship, and that's what they're doing. The evangelical church, I go into detail about, again, remember what Lenin said, the best way to defeat your opposition is to lead it. That's why so many people that are supposed to be speaking for us in the evangelical church, the ones that always seem to get the microphone put in front of them, they're not talking Bible, they're not talking truth. You're like, hey, that guy's supposed to be one of us. Well, when you've been controlling a lot of seminaries, about 90% of the seminaries in America do not believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God anymore. That's how successful they have been. On and on. William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, he kind of warned us. He said, the chief danger of the 20th century will be religion without the Holy Spirit, Christianity without Christ, forgiveness without repentance, salvation without regeneration, politics without God, and heaven without hell. Boy, didn't he hit that right on the head? That's where we are today. That's our reality today. The purposefulness behind what's happening economically is there. I don't have time to go into. The purposeful inflation. It's why my grandfather bought a nice house in 1915 for $4,500. My father bought a nice house in 1965 for $45,000, and my house today is $450,000. That's a purposeful stealing the wealth of the people to enslave them in big government. And it goes into detail showing you that in their own words, they said that's what it's for. It's not me saying that, it's them saying that, and they did it. That's why it's so hard to make it anymore. The thing we have to understand is this: our enemy is in control of almost everything. Education, entertainment, media, Washington, D.C., the culture, even a lot of the evangelical church is directed by change agents that are purposefully directing the church off course. That has always been the greatest enemy of communism and Marxism and socialism. And here's something I want you to understand. We legitimize them when we accuse them, on whatever the issue might be, of being naive or ignorant, or they just don't get it. They don't understand how economics works. Have you ever caught yourself saying that about the other side? They just don't get it. Why would they be pushed? That's not going to help the economy. Well, I'm here to tell you soberly, we are the ones that have been naive. They know exactly what they are doing. It is a purposeful destruction of the institutions of influence. They know exactly what they're doing. They have not been naive. They are geniuses. And we are the ones that need to wake up. There's so many things here that I could get into. A lot of you might remember this picture from Tiananmen Square in 1989 when a lot of the Chinese college students went out just with peacefully wanting a little more freedom. Maybe we can listen to a little bit of our music, or maybe we can, talk about things and of course we saw the Chinese government rear up and execute over 3,000 of them while the TV cameras were grinding away. This one man here, known as the Tank Man, he stood in front of this line of tanks and he stopped. And every time they tried to go around him, he just stood and he stood. And later he was taken out and executed that day. But he was willing to stand for the truth. Are you? I hope you are. In studying communism, I came across a very interesting story from 1989 also about Romania. Romania was a horrible communist country. With the leader was Ceausescu, just a ruthless man. And there was this one church in December of 1989 that he had sent the bulldozers to go bulldoze, which he'd done to many of them. But this one congregation with the pastor said, nope, we're not going to let him do that. That's our church. And so they stood out front of it with candles. There was about 25 people. So the bulldozers came and they saw the people there and they didn't know what they were supposed to do. If people were there, so they went back to find directions. They said, take it down anyway. Well, they came back the next day and there was hundreds of people. So they went back and again and got directions. There wasn't cell phones and things back then. They came back and there was thousands of people. And finally, Ceausescu said, start mowing them down. So they opened up with machine guns, started killing. I think they killed over 500 of these Christians out there, just holding candles in front of their church so it wouldn't be bulldozed. But God, because of their willingness to sacrifice, did something. He convicted and pierced the hearts of those communist soldiers. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of while they were shooting those people down, they stopped. And they realized, wait a minute. We're killing our own people. They turned those tanks around, they drove back to the palace, and they grabbed Ceausescu and his wife. And they took them out and hung them that day and executed them. And the next day, the headlines of the paper in a communist Romania was, the Antichrist is dead, Jesus is born. It was Christmas morning. That's what God can do. That's what God can do with our sacrifice. We have to be willing. We have to be able. Jesus Christ is worth it. He is the truth. Anytime you stand for the truth, any kind of truth, you are standing for Him because He is the truth. We've had warnings. So many people I interviewed in the movie lived in communist countries, and they're warning me, saying, listen, you don't understand. We've already been through this once. It's exactly what's going on in America, what was going on in our country. Wake up. And I don't have time to show you those clips right now, but they're important. So I'm going to do two quick things. One is I want to read you a letter to help you better understand the communist Marxist mind and understand what we're up against and what we should be like as far as our letter of dedication. This is a letter from a gentleman who went down to Mexico when he was a college student and he became a communist. And he wrote this letter back, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it, to his fiancée, telling her why he couldn't get married to her now, because he'd found his true love. Listen. We communists have a philosophy of life which no amount of money could buy. We have a cause to fight for, a definite purpose in life. We subordinate our petty personal selves into a greater movement of humanity. And if our personal lives seem hard or our egos appear to suffer through subordination to the party, then we are adequately compensated by the thought that each of us, in his small way, is contributing to something new and true and better for mankind, the struggle for world communism. There is one thing in which I am dead earnest, and that is the communist cause. It is my life, my business, my religion, my hobby, my sweetheart, my wife and mistress, my bread and meat. I work at it in the daytime and I dream of it at night. Its hold on me grows, not lessen, as time goes by. Therefore, I cannot carry on a friendship, a love affair, or even a conversation without relating to this force which both drives and guides my life. I evaluate people and books and actions according to how they affect the communist cause and by their attitude toward it. I've already been in jail because of my ideas, and if necessary, I'm ready to go before a firing squad. Are you that committed to Jesus Christ? You should be. We all need to be. Now listen, I'm closing with this. I felt 8 years ago, I was supposed to make a movie. It was an act of obedience. I'd never made a film before in my life. So I quit my job. I have 9 children. I took our life savings, used every penny of it to make a film because I thought God wanted me to make a film. And I want to show you this clip here in closing. This is the last thing to remind you who is in charge. Don't you forget the king is on his throne. The key to our success in standing for truth can be summed up in one word: obedience. Are you doing what God wants you to do in every aspect of your life? The movies, music, everything. He is Lord over everything. He is not just Lord over the church buildings. And we need to live like that. Well, we obeyed, we made a film. And while we were making the film, we hadn't even started yet. I told the children, I said, yes, I finally was convicted. God wants us to make a film. And so that night, my kids said, why don't we pray? They'd heard that there was a huge film festival in San Antonio, Texas, that had a $101,000 grand prize. They said, why don't we fast and pray on Friday that the film wins that? Now, I haven't even made the film yet. I haven't even bought a camera yet. The faith of a child. And I said, okay, that sounds good, but I'm like, I don't want them to be disappointed. Well, to make a long story short, we fasted that Friday. And the next Friday, I came down to get stuff out for breakfast, and my oldest daughter said, Daddy, we're fasting today. I said, oh, this Friday too? And she goes, we're fasting every Friday until it wins the festival. And my children and family, they fasted every Friday for 22 months that our film would win the festival. And I want to show you this. In 2007, I was a state representative, and I had no idea the things I would discover about why America was collapsing from within would motivate me to take my life savings and make a film. And I had never made a film before. During the 2 years it took to finish the project, my children prayed daily that it would win the largest single cash prize film festival in America, which in my thinking was a mighty tall order. But of course, it wasn't for God.
The 2010 $101,000 grand prize for Best of Festival goes to Agenda!
God is so good. I'd like to thank him for just the wonderful wife he gave me. I don't think any man can even reach a fraction of his potential if he doesn't have the woman with him that God intended him to have for life. And I want to thank her. Kids, I'm giving this to you so you'll always remember God does answer prayers. Thank you so much.
God is in the business of doing the impossible. All he asks is that we give him our loaves and fishes. He'll feed the 5,000. Thank you very much.
This has been Masters of Deceit, presented by Curtis Bowers. To receive a free catalog of over 250 awesome Bible studies on DVD or CD, all using and defending a literal translation of the Bible, information on upcoming Bible conferences in your area, or details of our missionary outreach and trips to Israel, call Compass at 800-977-2177 24 hours a day, or visit us on the web at compass.org.